Good afternoon. Welcome to another quick video I wanted to make. This video is going to be discussing installing and running a Squid proxy. So what is a proxy server? In computer networks, a proxy server basically is any computer or system or application that will act as an intermediary for requests from clients trying to go online or to go to other services. So essentially, what that boils down to is, say you're going online and you go to a website, say google.com, simply google.com. Every time you go there, your computer goes out, connects to the internet, and fetches the website and returns it for you. What a proxy server will do is it will sit in between you and the internet. So you would connect to the proxy server, which would then connect to the internet, download the web page, send it back to the proxy server, and then the proxy server would send it to you. I know at first glance it may seem like this wouldn't do a whole bunch or might even slow the connection down, simply because you're going to be going through more devices to get to your end connection point or end destination. However, a proxy server also caches or stores copies of the web pages. So essentially, you actually don't have to go online or don't have to download another copy of the page every time somebody requests the page, or even possibly yourself if you reload the page. So as an example, what we have here is a quick diagram. I didn't make this diagram, I just found this online, but it was a really good visual representation, so I wanted to kind of go over it. So here's your internet connection, and here's your proxy server. So say that you have a user who goes to this website, it looks like Krizna.com, right? So the first time they go there, the request goes out to the computer, over to the proxy server, and then the proxy server says, hey, I don't have this website, no one's visited this yet, it's the first time I've seen this website. It goes out to the internet, downloads Krizna.com, and then sends it back to this user. Now, if you have another user on at your location who requests, say, Krizna.com again, what happens is this person sends the request. The proxy server says, hey, look, I've already seen this page before. I know what it looks like recently. And it just sends it right back. It bypasses the whole going out to the internet and downloading the page. So what that's going to do, one of the key benefits of having a proxy server is caching or storing copies of the web pages so they can be reloaded again subsequent times to save you from downloading it, which should ultimately save you bandwidth and make your local office network, your home network, whatever you're going to install this proxy server, it should overall make it much quicker. It's going to conserve bandwidth. So when a proxy server sends data out, obviously your connection is sped up. So for example, say it takes 12 seconds for it to load initially this page, Krizna.com, right? So it ends up going and getting stored in this proxy server. When the user B tries to access the same site, that server, as mentioned, is going to give them a cache copy, and it may take half the time to load. And it's also not going to use any of your internet bandwidth. Same thing here with this third computer going to the website. So it doesn't matter how many users, whether it's 2 users end up visiting the same site or 1,000 users. Same concept. It's going to save all of that data transfer. So in this case, Google is the first time it goes, so it goes and downloads it, and then subsequent accesses to Google would have the benefit of the caching. Another benefit you're going to get with a proxy server, and this is going to serve more towards network administration or admin role. It's going to be useful for large businesses, even small businesses, where several users, as mentioned, are accessing the network through one proxy server. The administrator can set up access rules that will allow you to block sites. So say you want to block, Facebook. Maybe your employees are wasting time on that, and you want to block that site, Facebook. Maybe it's porn. Obviously, they shouldn't be doing that at work unless you work in that type of industry. But maybe you want to block that. Maybe game sites, like people are looking at playing games online or whatnot. Whatever you want to block for whatever reason, you can block it for all users. So that's going to be one of the most common uses of a proxy server as well. And that also goes for outbound as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Most people think of inbound filtering, but you can also scan outbound content for data leak protection. Maybe you have some confidential information that you don't want sent out, so you can use keywords in that potentially to stop data leaks from your company. And you do that through something called ACL, or access control lists, and that will let you specify certain websites and how they can be accessed. So there's two ways to implement a proxy server. The first one is application-specific configuration. So essentially, you're going to enter in the settings into the web browser, the mail client, whatever it is you happen to be using that you want to send the traffic to the proxy server. You actually have to configure that particular program to use the proxy server. A second way a proxy can be set up on a network system-wide is called a transparent proxy. And a transparent proxy essentially makes it so everything automatically goes through to the proxy. So you would configure your router, and I'll kind of give you a little diagram here on this. You would configure your router. Oops, definitely not that. You would configure, there we go. You would configure your router to send everything to the proxy. So the user, in your office, they connect through switch, ends up going back to the router. Well, the router sends everything over to the Squid Proxy and then back out and in. So obviously, if it has a cached page, it's going to go through this path, follow, then go right back down. So you can actually configure it so the router will send all requests over to Squid Proxy, and that can help with maybe some more tech-savvy users at your office who realize what a proxy is and potentially could try to bypass it to unblock certain sites. If you configure it at the router level, well, there's really not much they can configure in their specific application, to bypass your Squid Proxy that you're using as a filter. So those are some of the big reasons why you'd want a proxy. Now, how do I go about setting up a proxy? Personally, I'm going to use something called ESXi. I'm using ESXi version 5 for my home server. You could also use VirtualBox. You could use VMware Player. Essentially, you could even install it on a dedicated machine if you want to do that. In my instance, I'm going to use a VM, and I'm actually going to walk you through setting it up. I'm going to assume most people do know how, at this point, to configure and install a VM, but if not, I'll give you a quick run through on ESXi. The process would be pretty similar in VMware Player. ESXi is from VMware, as is VMware Player. So you got to make a new virtual machine, and I'll just call it test 1 because I'm not going to keep this machine. I pick my data store, basically which storage device. I'm going to be using Ubuntu Linux 64-bit for this particular tutorial and demo. Yeah, that looks fine. So we'll thin provision it. You don't need a lot of space for a proxy server generally. At least I don't. I'm going to use more RAM. You can, if you want to use a hard drive for storage, you can definitely do that. I recommend having an SSD storage if you're going to be using hard drive, just to speed that up, because the slowest part of the computer is the hard disk. So let's see, and I'm definitely going to edit a couple things. Now, what I want to do is I'll give it about 1.5 gigs of memory just for testing. Is I want to make sure I mount my install image for my server, because obviously I'm making a new machine. I have to install an operating system onto it. I have my ISOs, or my images, stored in my ESXi server. Something to note: if you're going to use a data store ISO locally on that machine, you need to set it to IDE 00. That's something that's required, and I want the device to connect when I turn the computer on, the VM on. So I'll finish it. So essentially, here you go. We have a new VM set up on ESXi. So now we have to actually install it's install Ubuntu onto it. So we'll start the machine up. And hey, look, there we go. So we're going to put in English. We're going to install Ubuntu server. Yep, English, United States. Yep. So I assume most of you guys know how to do this and let this go through. I may pause this video while I actually install Ubuntu. So I'll probably come back when I'm at the packages part. But this is going to run through really quick. It takes a few minutes to do. Also, you can clone and set up clones, or basically default profiles for EXXI to make new machines, so it's a lot quicker. I haven't bothered doing that yet because it was my home server and I only installed a couple, and that's going to be it. But for the purposes of video, we will go with this particular come on, just let me do it. Test. Sure, we'll use test for the password. Why not? Yeah, it's a weak password. So I'll come back when it comes to the package installation, and we'll go from there. Alright, welcome back. So I'm picking the packages I want to install. The only package I actually want to install is going to be OpenSSH server, and that will be used more for future videos. I'm going to make a video that shows you how to set up a transparent proxy using the Ubiquiti Edge Router Lite. Now, in this particular video, I'm only going to go over application-specific configurations for the proxy server. So personally, I have parties at my house sometimes, and there'll be a number of users here, 15, 20 users. So proxy really does help with my limited home bandwidth. So it keeps things running quite a bit smoother when you have a huge number of users on your network. That's my personal use for it, and then professionally, obviously used in an office. So I'm going to come back in a moment. I'm going to wait for Ubuntu to finish installing, and then we will continue on with actually installing and configuring Squid Proxy, and then we'll test it out to show you it's working. Alright, so my Ubuntu is loading up here. We'll give it a bit of time, and we're ready to log in. So we'll give it a second here. There we go. So what I want to do is obviously show you how much I'm using, processes, when I last logged in, IP address for the device, which is going to be perfect, which you can also get from an IF config. Will also show you the IP address there, the 192.168.1.10 that I have, that this machine has been assigned by my local router. So first thing I like to do personally, and this is just a personal preference, I always like to change or actually enable the root user. So I'd like to enable my new root user. That's just my personal preference. I don't generally use it, but I do like to enable the root user. So that's sudo passwd space root, and that will let you enable your root user. Your password, or it's a sudo password for test. That's your password that we set up during the installation, and then you pick your root user password. So to install Squid, it's a simple command. It's sudo sudo apt-get, missed the T, install, and then the word Squid. So it's going to actually go through and install. Yes, I do want to install it. So we'll give it some time here for Squid to download and install. Alright, so Squid's installed. It's that simple. So the next thing I want to do is I want to actually configure Squid, because it doesn't come configured appropriately, at least for usage right out of the box. So I use VI editor, and it's etc/squid3/ and then it's squid.conf. So that's where the configuration file is stored for Squid. So there's some items we have to actually change in here to get Squid working. So we're going to scroll down for a little bit of time. There is actually is quite a bit we got to scroll past, but we'll get there. This is where you're looking at the ACL, all the access control list stuff. Okay, so what we want to do, it's easy to uncomment the existing one. My network scope range is the 192 range. So I want to change local net and enable. So what ACL stands for is access control list. So the local host is the local IP address, right? So the 127.0.0/32, so this is the singular IP address, and also two local hosts. So when you what this ACL does is it's an access control set, or an access control. So we're setting up an access control with the name of local net that has the IP range of 192.168.0.0/16. So anything from 0.0 to 255.255. For the ending last 2 octets of the IP address. So that's going to cover basically everything on your local network. Obviously, if you're using a different internal network scheme like 10. Scheme or 172. Scheme, or even potentially IPv6 schemes, right? You want to enable the appropriate one. So this allows different ports. For most uses out of the box, it's going to be appropriate. So then we're going to we scroll down here. This is where we need to allow access. So right now, the way it works is it's a priority. So somebody tries to access, say, HTTP. The manager is the configuration, so it's allowed from localhost only. But I want to be able to administer this from anywhere on my network personally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an HTTP_access allow manager local net. That was the name of the IP range for my internal network that we talked about at the top. So I want to be able to do that. And also, as you scroll down here, these are the allowed devices that can actually connect and use the proxy server. As it is right now, it's only allowing the local host, because then the next rule that is in here is deny all. So it's, if it isn't the local host, then deny it essentially. So what I'm going to set up is HTTP access allow local net. So then it'll say, is it the local host? No. Is it the local net? In most cases, for your users, to be yes, it will allow them. If it doesn't meet that rule, it's just going to deny them, which is what we want. We don't want our proxy server to be used for public use. Otherwise, spammers and whatnot, they will utilize your proxy server without your consent, doing all types of nasty things that you generally don't want somebody using your connection for. So then we're going to go through and change a couple other little items here. So HTTP port, this is the port it connects on. So personally, I want to change the port that this connects on, and I'm going to change it to 80. Oops, I forgot to turn on my numlock. There we go, 8080. So I want my port to be 8080 for this. This is my personal preference. You can use whatever port you want. 3128 is the default port. So we'll keep going through here. I think it's around the 35% mark is the next thing I want to talk about. There we go. So what this cache mem item does is this tells the Squid Proxy how much memory to use of RAM to store cached web pages. Personally, what I want to do is I want to change this to, I don't know, we'll say, because we're have a gig and a half of memory on the machine, a little more. Let's change to 800 megabytes. That should be fine. Generally, I want to see how much free memory you have, and then I like to subtract, say, 500 megabytes or so for other processes, other things running, just different system usage as it goes on, and then I assign the rest of the memory of the machine to Squid. So there's that, and then the other items, other item you can do here is maximum object size memory. So this is basically how big the individual thing can be. So say you have an image file, right? For like Google.com or CNN, or you go to some web page and it loads up images. So if it's over a certain size, it actually won't store it in the cache memory. It may store it on disk, which we'll talk about in a second, but it won't store in cache memory. Considering personally I only use RAM for my cache, I don't use the disk in my limited use. I actually disable, or actually really increase the size of the allowed items, because I know that it's likely that maybe an image might be, say, 800 kilobytes, and now I have to re-download it versus before. So I change it to 1500 kilobytes, so 1.5 megabytes, give or take. And then if you want to use your hard drive for storage, just say you want to actually, because it still is a lot quicker generally to use a hard drive to load data than it is a downloading from the internet in most cases. So you can uncache this right here, uncheck this, unmark this, and that will allow a cache directory. So it's a type of directory, it's just UFS. The location where it's going to store it, the megabytes, and then the L1 and L2. I won't really go into that much, but this is the number of megabytes it would use for storage, so 100 megabytes. So you could use 1,000 megabytes, 5,000 for 5 gigs. You generally also want to have about 20 megabytes of memory per gigabyte of disk storage. That's just the rule of thumb. But I actually don't want to use that, so I'm going to recomment it out. And really our editing is done here. So I'm going to save the file with a :W. Yep, let's see. Okay, so I forgot to do it as a root user. So, great. I'll make a couple quick edits. I'll be back with you shortly. So that's when I say the proper command to use to edit is sudo space vi space and then the file name. So I'm going to do that and make those quick edits again. I know exactly where they are in the FIG file. It'll only take me a moment, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so I have the the edits back in. Only took me a moment to do so. And what I'm going to do is save the file this time. Hey, look, I saved the file. And then :Q to quit. So the next thing we want to do, since we edited the configuration, we need to restart the service. So there's a couple ways to do it. You can do it through the initd. You can also do it through sudo command. I'll show you both. So you can do /sudo sudo. So then you do initd. You can do that. So since I rebooted the machine, the other way that actually you want to do it after the initial launch is sudo service squid 3 and then restart, and that will restart the service. So there we go, so it's running. I actually didn't put the port back, so I'm going to be using, you know what, actually I'll do a quick edit of that so you can see exactly what happens. So I forgot to edit my my port back. To 8080. There we go. So we'll go to 8080, which is what I personally prefer. Alright. So again, I'll restart the service. So you'll see the service restart, give it a new thing. So then this will be running. So now I have the proxy server running. It's that simple to get the proxy server up and running. So as mentioned, ifconfig shows right here my IP address is 192.168.1.10 and it's running on port 8080. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Google Chrome as a browser. We'll set this up. So we'll go into the settings, and since I'm doing application specific, and this is going to be just for individual things, you have to configure each browser separately. My next video will go over installing this and configuring this so it's a transparent proxy inside of the Edge Router Lite. But what I'm going to do, there is an item in here for change proxy settings, which opens up the Windows settings. So we'll do LAN settings, and we'll change it to 110, which is the IP that you can see. Where is it here? Right here. So it's 192.168.1.110 right there, and port is 8080. So we'll hit OK. We'll save the configuration, and now if I go back to Google and type in, I don't know, let's say I go to CNN.com, right? And CNN is loading up. It's actually using the proxy server to load CNN. Might take a second, the initial time. There we go. So CNN's loading up. So Germany 1, USA 0, and you can see it uses the proxy server to load the data. There we go. So say you want to go to, I don't know, say /.org. It's one of my favorite sites. I like going here. See, there you go. So the proxy server is loading. So CNN's running a little slow. So, and then you click on things and it loads up. So it's using the proxy server as configured. So that's as simple as that to install and set up a proxy server using Ubuntu Linux. And this is Squid Proxy. It's an open source proxy server. The next video will go over actually forcing and transparent proxies. I hope you guys found this informative and useful. And till next time, have a great day.